Good evening, and welcome to Twilight Dance. Tonight's story is about the unicorn, a creature spoken of for centuries, said to exist just beyond the edges of the world unknown. So settle in, relax, and let the story carry you into a quiet and restful night.
Good evening, and welcome. Tonight we begin with one of the oldest and most enduring creatures ever imagined in human history, the unicorn. Long before it appeared in storybooks or became a symbol of fantasy, people across ancient civilizations described an unusual animal with a single horn, said to move quietly through distant lands where few travelers had ever gone. These early descriptions were not always filled with magic in the way we might expect today. Instead, they often portrayed the unicorn as a real and powerful creature, something rare, difficult to approach, and existing somewhere just beyond the reach of ordinary human experience. In those early times, the world was still largely unexplored, and much of it remained unknown. Stories traveled slowly, carried by merchants, explorers, and travelers who shared what they had seen or believed they had seen. It was through these journeys that the idea of the unicorn began to spread. A distant animal, described with enough detail to feel real, yet mysterious enough to remain just out of reach. Over time, these descriptions became more consistent. A creature with a single horn, often strong and swift, sometimes calm and graceful, and always rare. As these stories moved across regions and cultures, they began to take on new meanings. The unicorn was no longer just an unusual animal from faraway lands, but something more symbolic. It represented something pure, something untouched, something that existed outside the ordinary patterns of the world. And even though no one could fully prove its existence, there was also no clear way to deny it. The world was vast, and there were many places no one had seen. In that space between knowledge and imagination, the unicorn found its place, quietly becoming part of human history. As stories of the unicorn continued to travel, they began appearing in different parts of the world, often shaped by the cultures that received them. In ancient India, for example, carvings and seals have been discovered that show animals with a single horn, standing quietly among other creatures. These images are simple, but they suggest that the idea of a one-horned animal existed long before written descriptions became common. Over time, these visual representations blended with spoken stories, forming a shared understanding of something rare and unusual. As trade routes expanded, so did the reach of these stories. Merchants carried goods across vast distances, but they also carried ideas. Along with spices, fabrics, and metals came stories of distant lands and the creatures believed to live there. The unicorn was one of those creatures, described with enough detail to feel real, yet distant enough to remain mysterious. Each retelling added something new, whether it was the color of its coat, the shape of its horn, or the way it moved through the world with quiet confidence. What makes these stories so interesting is how consistent they remained, even as they spread. The image of a single horn, rising from the head of a powerful animal, appeared again and again. It is as if different cultures, separated by distance and language, were all describing the same idea, each adding their own perspective while keeping the core image intact. This consistency helped the unicorn remain believable, even as it moved further into the realm of legend. In ancient Greece, the unicorn became more widely known through the writings of historians and scholars who described the natural world. These writers often recorded animals that lived in distant regions, relying on second-hand accounts from travelers who had ventured far beyond familiar territories. Among these descriptions was a creature said to resemble a wild animal with a single horn, living in lands far to the east. To those reading these accounts, there was little reason to question them, as many other unfamiliar animals were also being described for the first time. The world during this period was still filled with mystery, and the boundaries of knowledge were constantly expanding. When people heard about creatures they had never seen, they often accepted their existence as part of the natural world. The unicorn, in this context, was not necessarily seen as magical, but simply rare and difficult to find. It became one of many examples of how vast and unknown the world still was, reminding people that there were always more discoveries waiting beyond the horizon. Over time, these written accounts gave the unicorn a stronger presence in history. It was no longer just a story passed through spoken word, but something recorded and preserved. This helped solidify its place in human understanding, allowing the idea of the unicorn to continue evolving while remaining connected to its earlier origins. As the centuries passed, the unicorn began to take on new meaning, especially in medieval Europe, where it became closely associated with ideas of purity and innocence. Artists and storytellers started to portray the unicorn as a gentle and graceful creature, often shown resting peacefully in natural settings. In many of these depictions, the unicorn appeared calm and unthreatening, a quiet presence in a world that was often filled with uncertainty and change. One of the most common beliefs was that the unicorn could only be approached by someone pure of heart. According to these stories, the creature would avoid all others, remaining hidden in forests or distant valleys where few people could reach it. This idea added to its mystery, making it not just rare, but selective. It was not something that could be hunted or captured through force, but something that revealed itself only under the right conditions. These stories resonated deeply with people at the time, as they reflected a desire for something untouched and uncorrupted. The unicorn became a symbol of what people wished to protect and preserve, representing a kind of quiet perfection that existed outside the struggles of everyday life. In this way, the unicorn moved further away from being just an animal and became a powerful symbol woven into art, religion, and storytelling. Alongside these symbolic meanings, there were also beliefs about the unicorn's horn, often referred to as an alicorn. It was said to possess remarkable properties, including the ability to neutralize poison and purify water. These ideas became widely accepted during certain periods, leading many to seek out objects believed to be unicorn horns. In reality, these items often came from other animals, but the belief in their power remained strong. The idea that something so rare could also be so powerful added another layer to the unicorn's legend. It was not just a creature of beauty or mystery, but one associated with healing and protection. For those who believed in its existence, the unicorn represented a kind of natural balance, a force that could restore what had been disrupted. These beliefs helped the unicorn maintain its relevance over time. Even as knowledge of the natural world grew, and more animals were discovered and understood, the unicorn continued to hold a place in human imagination. It was no longer necessary for it to exist physically, because its meaning had become more important than its reality. The unicorn had become something timeless, carried forward not by proof, but by the ideas and emotions it represented. In many stories, the unicorn was believed to live in places untouched by ordinary human life, far beyond roads, villages, and cultivated fields. It belonged to landscapes that felt older than memory, where forests stretched across great distances and silence settled gently over the land. These were not places of crowds or noise, but quiet regions where wind moved through leaves, water passed over stone, and every sound seemed softened by distance. People imagined that if someone traveled far enough into such a place, moving slowly and without disturbance, they might eventually come close to seeing a unicorn, though never fully reaching it. This made the creature feel both possible and unreachable at the same time. Travelers sometimes returned with stories of unusual glimpses, a pale shape between trees, a movement in the fog, or the impression that something had just passed by moments earlier. They could never describe it with certainty, yet that uncertainty only made the legend stronger. The unicorn became the kind of creature that seemed to exist just beyond proof, always near enough to imagine, but never near enough to capture. In this way, it remained protected by mystery. Because of this, the unicorn came to be associated with patience, stillness, and the quiet parts of the natural world. Unlike other mythical beings that were described as loud, destructive, or frightening, the unicorn carried a different kind of power. It did not dominate its surroundings. It belonged to them. Its presence suggested balance rather than chaos, calm rather than fear, and distance rather than spectacle. That difference is part of what made the unicorn so enduring. It was not simply a legend to excite the mind, but one that invited reflection. Over time, this image became more settled in cultural memory. The unicorn was imagined less as something people hunted and more as something they hoped might exist somewhere beyond ordinary life, in a place where the world remained undisturbed. In that sense, the unicorn represented more than a creature. It represented the possibility that some part of the world could still remain quiet, hidden, and untouched. As the legend continued to develop across centuries, the unicorn gradually became a symbol as much as a creature. In medieval Europe especially, it was often linked to purity, gentleness, and innocence. Artists painted it in peaceful settings, surrounded by trees, flowers, or soft hills, often resting rather than running. These images helped shape the unicorn into something calm and graceful, different from the harsher beasts that appeared in many old stories. It was not imagined as a threat, but as a rare and noble presence, one that could only appear where the world had grown still enough to receive it. Some stories claimed that the unicorn could only be approached by a person with a pure heart. According to these legends, it would avoid all others and remain hidden from those who carried selfishness, greed, or violence within them. Whether taken literally or symbolically, this idea gave the unicorn a special role in storytelling. It was no longer simply rare because of geography, but rare because of character. To see one was not merely a matter of traveling far enough. It also meant becoming the kind of person worthy of the encounter. This idea resonated deeply with people living through uncertain times. In a world often marked by conflict, disease, and instability, the unicorn came to represent something unspoiled. It stood for a kind of quiet perfection that had not been damaged by the ordinary troubles of life. This gave the creature emotional power. It was no longer just part of folklore. It became a reflection of hope, suggesting that goodness, beauty, and calm could still exist somewhere beyond the reach of hardship. As more stories were told, the unicorn's form became more familiar. It was often imagined with a bright or pale coat, graceful movement, and a single spiraled horn that made it instantly recognizable. These details remained consistent enough that the unicorn felt strangely remembered, even by those who knew it only through stories. That consistency helped preserve its place across generations. People might disagree about where it lived or whether it had ever existed, but the image itself stayed clear. And because it remained clear, the legend endured. Another important part of the unicorn's legend centered on its horn, often called an alicorn. In many old beliefs, this horn was thought to possess unusual properties, especially the power to purify. Some said it could cleanse poisoned water, while others believed it could protect against sickness or corruption. These stories spread widely enough that objects claimed to be unicorn horns became highly prized. In many cases they were actually taken from other animals, but that mattered less than the belief attached to them. People valued them not only for rarity, but for the idea that they carried healing and protection. This belief added another dimension to the unicorn's meaning. It was not just beautiful or elusive. It was restorative. In a symbolic sense, the horn represented the hope that something pure and untouched might also have the power to set things right. This made the unicorn especially compelling in times when the world felt uncertain or dangerous. It suggested that calm and strength could exist together, and that gentleness did not mean weakness. Instead, the unicorn came to embody a quiet kind of power, one that healed rather than harmed. Kings, nobles, collectors, and scholars sometimes kept supposed alicorns in treasuries or private collections, treating them as extraordinary objects. Even when doubts existed, the legend around them remained influential. This reveals something important about the story of the unicorn. Its endurance never depended entirely on physical proof. It survived because it answered a deeper need in human imagination. People wanted to believe that somewhere in nature there existed something rare, incorruptible, and quietly powerful. Even as scientific knowledge expanded and more of the natural world became understood, the unicorn did not fully disappear. Instead, its meaning shifted. The literal belief may have faded, but the symbolism remained. The unicorn continued to stand for purity, balance, rarity, and wonder. It remained part of art, literature, and memory because it had become larger than the question of whether it had ever walked the earth. By then, it had already secured its place in the human mind, where stories often last longer than facts. What makes the unicorn so enduring is that it never belonged to only one place or one time. Versions of the one-horned creature appeared in different traditions, shaped by different languages and beliefs, yet connected by a familiar sense of wonder. In some cultures it was gentle and wise. In others it was swift, proud, or mysterious. But across these differences, the central idea remained the same, a rare being that existed just beyond the ordinary world. This shared pattern helped the unicorn survive while many other legends slowly faded. Even in modern times, the unicorn continues to appear in stories, art, and imagination. Its image has changed in style, but not in essence. It still represents something uncommon, something untouched by the noise of daily life. That may be one reason people continue to return to it. In a world that often feels crowded, fast, and demanding, the unicorn offers a different feeling. It suggests quiet spaces, distant forests, and moments of stillness. It reminds us that mystery can still exist, even when so much of the world feels explained. There is also something comforting in the fact that the unicorn has never needed to be fully proven in order to remain meaningful. It survives because it speaks to emotions that facts alone do not satisfy. It invites people to imagine landscapes where calm and beauty still live undisturbed. It reflects the hope that somewhere beyond pressure and noise, something graceful still moves through the world, unseen but present. And so the story of the unicorn remains, carried gently through centuries by travelers, artists, poets, and dreamers. It lingers in the background of culture not as a question that needs a final answer, but as a symbol that continues to matter. As you begin to rest and let the day fall away, imagine those distant places where such a creature might belong, among trees, soft wind, and quiet light. Whether real or imagined, the unicorn endures because it represents something peaceful, rare, and worth holding on to. Thank you for listening tonight, and may your rest be calm until we meet again here in Twilight Dance.
Thank you for listening tonight. If you enjoyed this story, there are many more waiting for you here on Twilight Dance. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next one.